Our Indian culture, history and heritage is rich and glorious. Not only it is a matter of pride for us, but it is a precious treasure for the generations to learn from. However, it is interesting to see how well is the Indian culture understood in the countries abroad, especially in the Western world. My guest today is an eminent cultural historian who has worked a great deal in building a very genuine understanding of what Indian culture is all about. Please welcome with me Dr. Kusum Pant Joshi on her stories. She began her career way back in 1973 as a lecturer in the Department of Medieval and Modern History at the University of Allahabad. From there onwards, Dr. Kusum Pant Joshi has had a spectacular growth as a cultural historian, researcher and a writer. And through her work, she has contributed tremendously in influencing the way that Indian culture is perceived and understood in the Western world. She has authored several books that have captured the lives of legendary filmmakers, the lives of South Asian women in the UK, and also the lives of Kashmiri Pandits. As a co-founder and a chief researcher at the South Asian Cinema Foundation, she continues to work on several projects that aim to build a positive and a genuine understanding of India's glorious culture. I'm very pleased to have you here.
Hello.
Thank you. Ma'am, you have spent a long part of your life looking at Indian culture, how it has evolved, what are the transitions, what it actually has. And you have seen that perception in the UK and countries abroad, how it has been looked at, especially in the turn of the 19th, 20th century. As a cultural historian, what is the contribution you have been able to make and also capture the perception people have of India and how has it changed? If you could share a little about that.
I will try to be as brief as possible and just give you a bird's eye view of the situation as it was and how it has perhaps evolved in a positive direction somewhat. What I perceived after beginning my look at the way Indians in Indian culture in Britain has been shaping up was that in the early 20th century, that is right up to almost 1910, what we find is although many Indians had started coming to the West, to Britain for their studies largely, and some had even settled here, and there were others who came as students and then went back. In spite of this going and coming, the perception of Indian culture and about our ancient heritage, especially our amazing architecture, our art, our painting and music and theatre. I mean, we have contributed so much to theatre. We have produced such great people like Kaleidoscope. But in spite of all these amazing people who had contributed to theatre, we had people who had written a whole treatise on the Navras theories and such things. I mean, we had great pieces of work which are like classics. But in spite of that, the perception of our culture was very negative, and and that was perhaps because we were under the British rule, and the colonial power wanted us to be. Can you just switch it off, please? They wanted to project or kind of inculcate a kind of vision in the minds of Indians that they hadn't anything to be really proud of, and that they had to learn a lot from the West because they were so backward and they had nothing much to take pride in. And this is reflected in some statements made by some very important people in this country, some of the officials, some of the authorities. They even made statements like there's no art in India, and that we have artifice, we just copy and we can produce designs and things, but we don't have really original art. And so it was quite amazing to to come across such statements. And it was slowly only after some British people themselves who had realized the greatness of Indian culture and aesthetics, who felt revolted by such statements and who started feeling that it was very unfair to have such a negative projection and perception of Indian culture, which was really worth a lot of exploration and admiration. And slowly people started, some of the Britishers themselves who took up this work, and there were some Indians here who worked with them. And so in 1910, in fact, the India Society was formed here, and which had the aim of changing this perception and of projecting a proper understanding of the greatness of Indian culture. And that's how slowly the idea of Indian culture began to be changed, and the repercussions of that we are finding today. But the negative impact of that, and the Orientalist perception, the negative perception which the West had about Indian culture, has been very difficult to eradicate also, because it takes a long time for something that has become entrenched to be changed. So although there has been a lot of movement, there is still a lot to change. So that's something which is visible.
Okay. And also that I understand that you have bringing in a lot of cinema from South Asia, and there is a lot of promotion of South Asian cinema in countries abroad. What is your work around that area like?
Right. About cinema, what we have been trying to do is through our organization. It is known as the South Asian Cinema Foundation, and it was set up in the year 2000. And it was set up by Kusum Pant Joshi, who happens to be my husband, and he was the others who were with him in this new initiative were Mr. P.K. Nair, who was one of the leading archivists of Indian films. He has done massive work, and he is remembered by all film writers and critics and people who have produced so many theses from all over the world. And he was involved, and Derek Malcolm, who is also a film reviewer, he was also involved in this. So it was mainly the effort of these three people who came together in a meeting in London and decided that it was time that perception of Indian cinema was changed, because mostly it was the Bombay cinema, Bollywood, which is not now known as Bollywood, which was sort of hogging the limelight, and people did not even know that apart from so-called Bollywood, there was a whole range of beautiful, very meaningful cinema coming from various regions of India, especially from Kerala, from Karnataka, from Bengal, which has had such a great history of producing classic films. So the main idea was to project the other kinds of cinema, that it was not only Bombay cinema that needs attention, and that Bombay cinema is okay, it's fine. I mean, if people like it, it's fine. But then there is more to Indian cinema than just Bombay cinema. It's a much wider thing. So we tried to project that. And if you would like to know how we did that, it was one was that we started a magazine which was known as South Asian Cinema, and in which we tried to project this new kind of cinema through articles and write-ups. And we asked people who had studied cinema in a serious way to contribute, and that was one way. And then we also, from time to time, we organized film festivals in which we invited directors from India, from not only from Bombay but also from the regions, and so that they could come and talk about their work. And we had held film screenings, and for this we worked with other organizations who are already established, such as the British Film Institute, which is the leading film organization in this country, and also with some universities such as the University of Westminster. So there were people who were interested in this kind of cinema who came and tried to support us, and we also tried to work through some cultural organizations who would screen these films. So we tried to build some partnership, but it was quite an uphill task because it doesn't have that much consumption, unlike Bollywood, which excites everybody. All sort of everyone is attracted towards the fun and frolic of this of Bollywood, but more meaningful cinema, people generally think, oh, it's very boring, but it is not. It is very meaningful, and if only they would give the time and attention, they would find that it makes a lot of sense, and it is also quite entertaining.
Of course. Yeah. So, how has that? What kind of an audience have you received? Like, how has it been taken forward, and what is the response you get from the audience that come forth for such cinema?
Well, I must admit that it's not a very huge response because it's a kind of a niche kind of a cinema, and it attracts only some kind of people. So it's more the people who are interested in something, some kind of meaningful comment or take on life, who are interested in it. Like there could be some film students, and there could be some film academics. Then of course there are some people who are more into serious cinema who have been responding, but it isn't a very huge crowd. But yes, we do get to reach some people through connections.
So I'm curious to know that it is like you've been promoting Indian culture, building a realistic understanding of what it is in countries abroad. If we talk of India and the youth or the younger generation in India today, I wouldn't say that it is not being talked about in Indian homes, or what culture do we have, what is our history all about. But if guardians or parents have to consciously inculcate a proper sense of Indian culture in their children, what is the thing to be done, and what sort of a message would you give out to them? Because it is just a very honest thing today that social media is so highly prevalent, and everyone consumes what is there on social media. But besides that, what our books talk about, what is the culture all about, how rich and glorious it was, what can be some concrete steps taken by parents and guardians to build that understanding in their children?
Well, I think from my limited experience, what I would recommend strongly for parents to do is that, like us, like my parents, what they did when we were young was to firstly, I think language has to be stressed. We must the mother tongue learning has to be inculcated, because that is the source to reach back into the past and to gain a proper understanding of one's being, one's past and one's roots. That has very often been neglected, because I even hear that even Bengalis, who are generally supposed to be very conscious of their language, it seems some of my Bengali friends were saying that when they go back to Calcutta, they find many of the younger generation not speaking Bengali, which is very shocking, because I thought Bengalis were very conscious of their language and its rich literature. So one thing is that we must all make sure that our children speak our mother tongue, whether it is Hindi or Tamil or Bengali or whatever mother tongue speaking language is a must. And secondly, if one is a Hindu or an Indian with any interest in culture, I think Sanskrit is another thing which is a great source for our culture, and it's like a treasure house which will open out so much of value to the children. And if it is done at an early age, it is best, because at that time one's capacity to absorb and understand and learn is very sharp, and it's at its best. Later on, if we try to learn, it's always a more difficult thing to do. So language opens the doors to culture and to literature, and it is through literature and poetry and other such sources that one can enrich oneself. So, and then learning by heart some beautiful lines. I think this is another way. And reading the literature not only of our country but also of other cultures also enriches one's culture, so one can sort of compare and contrast and get a more wide perspective. And of course, exposure to cinema, to theatre, to mix with people of learning, people from whom we can learn, to sit in good company. Like हम लोग कहते हैं ना कि हम लोगों का जो साथ अच्छा होना चाहिए, that you should sit with people from whom you can learn. I remember my father used to say that when he was young, he would sometimes go and meet some friends, and his older brother would say, "तुम उसके पास जाते हो, what do you learn from him? Why are you wasting your time? Go to somebody from whom you can learn something." So it's not being selfish; it's just a better utilization of one's time to sit at the feet of somebody or with somebody from whom you can learn and imbibe and enrich yourself. So I think these are some of the ways of making sure that we and celebration of our festivals, to understand the idea behind that. Well, some people say, well, ritual, I don't believe in rituals. Ye sab kya hai? What's the point of doing this? Why should we do this? We try to rationalize too much because of our Western influence. But I think many things which are part of our tradition have a good reason behind it. So inculcating proper traditions, not I don't mean sticking to things and not changing, but anything that's reasonable and rational and which gives you some identity, it's a good thing. It's nice to follow some rituals and some traditions. So I think that's how we sort of stick to our roots, and we keep rooted, while at the same time that we move forward and we change and evolve.
Yes, thank you very much, Mrs. Pant, because what we see that it is so much of exposure that children receive, and in the midst of it, while the educational institutions, the social media, and the parental guidance, all of them have their own focus areas, but having a genuine understanding of one's culture, whether you're building it through the mother tongue or through the company of people or by reading, is something very essential as you grow up to really know your identity and be very and have high regard for it is very important. Thank you for your time, and I hope you continue to do the amazing work that you are doing, putting across a very honest and a real picture of how rich the Indian culture is. It was a pleasure to have a talk with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.